There is a liquid extract that costs barely $2 a liter. If you work it into a piece of leather, it dives deep into the structural fibers on a microscopic scale, locking in flexibility, strength, and moisture resistance for decades on end. A single container is enough to treat every piece of leather you will ever purchase for the rest of your life. We are not talking about those weak surface coats that vanish after a few weeks, forcing you to reapply them every time the weather changes. We are not talking about the kind of temporary fix that slathers silicone or wax on top, while the actual hide underneath continues to desiccate and crumble. This is a fat compound whose chemical makeup is so remarkably identical to the biological oils of the living hide that the material literally drinks it in. It is essentially returning a vital component that was meant to be there all along because, scientifically speaking, it is. The international leather industry brings in north of $400 billion a year. The maintenance side of that world, the creams, the weatherproofing sprays, the restoration balms, and the daily conditioners, pulls in over $5 billion annually. Wander into any high-end shoe retailer, outfitter, or equestrian shop, and you will see entire walls dedicated to these conditioning products, all demanding $10 to $40 for tiny amounts of liquid. Saphir Renovateur, Obenauf's heavy-duty LP, Venetian shoe cream, leather honey. Every single one of them is marketed as an elite, scientifically engineered cure for the inevitable decay of natural hides. Yet, the core of almost every one of these luxury items is simply mink oil, lanolin, beeswax, or Neatsfoot oil. These are the exact same animal and natural wax derivatives that craftsmen have relied upon for half a millennium. Saphir Renovateur commands $25 for a tiny 75 milliliter jar, leaning heavily on mink oil and lanolin to do the actual conditioning work. Leather Honey, a dominant bestseller online, is primarily just Neatsfoot oil suspended in a thicker base. The actual active ingredients driving these luxury maintenance items can be purchased in bulk for $2 or $3 a liter, giving you enough raw material to outlast your own wardrobe. This is the hidden history of Neatsfoot oil. This is the exact same substance that 15th century saddle makers squeezed from cattle bones, the exact same liquid that kept a knight's leather armor moving freely through freezing winter warfare, and the very material the United States Cavalry mandated for every soldier's gear. And it is the same ingredient that modern corporations have been burying inside gorgeous packaging to sell at a 2,000% markup for the last 8 decades. If discovering the truth behind the price tag matters to you, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Let us rewind to where this narrative actually begins. Picture a medieval tannery in 15th century England. Humans have been preserving animal skins for at least 7 millennia, turning raw hides into usable materials. Archaeologists have even pulled preserved leather out of Egyptian tombs dating back 3,000 years, but the tanning process only stops the material from rotting. It does not nourish it. Once tanned, the hide is completely stripped of the biological fats that kept it alive. Without them, the leather slowly dries out, becomes rigid, and eventually turns to dust. The internal collagen network loses its slip, and the microscopic bonds that give the hide its structural integrity simply snap under the stress of daily movement. Craftsmen in the Middle Ages figured this out through hard-won experience and fixed it using what they had lying around. Their primary conditioning tool was tallow, rendered sheep or cow fat, rubbed warm into the material to bring back its bend and keep the rain out. Tallow did the job and was incredibly cheap, but it had serious flaws. It could go rancid in the summer heat, it drew in pests, and it was hard to source in the massive quantities needed to maintain an entire army's gear. The shift to a vastly superior alternative, Neatsfoot oil, happened among English tanners and cobblers in the 14 and 1500s. By boiling the feet and lower leg bones of cattle, which were historically called neat, craftsmen could skim a golden liquid off the water's surface. This bone extract contained a specific fatty acid profile, heavily leaning on oleic and palmitoleic acids, that fought off spoiling far better than tallow. It also sank much deeper into the hide and worked exceptionally well at keeping gear pliable in wet weather. Military ledgers from King Henry VIII's era explicitly list Neatsfoot oil as a standard issue supply for keeping armor and horse tack in fighting shape. When Henry's flagship, the Mary Rose, sank into the ocean in 1545, it took a cache of leather items down with it. When the wreck was finally raised in the 1980s, historians marveled at perfectly preserved shoe parts and archery bracers. Their survival through 4 centuries of saltwater burial is heavily credited to the Neatsfoot oil treatment logged in the ship's cargo records. Modern conservationists even found the distinct chemical signatures of Neatsfoot oil soaked deep into the artifacts. Later on, the American cavalry perfected this preservation practice. From the Civil War straight through the First World War, the U.S. Army wrote Neatsfoot oil into their official maintenance doctrine for all leather gear. The cavalry school at Fort Riley in Kansas laid out exact schedules, precise measurements, and rigid techniques for oiling saddles as a core part of a soldier's training. When the military needed absolute reliability to keep their gear from falling apart, cattle bone oil was their chosen standard. Then, after the Second World War, consumer product companies woke up to this reality. They looked at Neatsfoot oil, mink oil, and lanolin and did exactly what the chemical and paint industries had done before them. They took cheap, incredibly effective raw materials, wrapped them in slick branding, and slapped a massive price tag on them, demanding a premium that the base ingredients alone could never justify. Let me explain exactly why this specific oil preserves hides so much better than any modern synthetic alternative, and what is actually happening on a microscopic level when your boots begin to crack. Leather is basically just collagen. It is the exact same structural protein that builds skin, connective tissue, and tendons in mammals. In a living animal, these collagen strands are constantly coated in a complex blend of biological oils released by sebaceous glands, keeping everything soft and mobile. Tanning strips away the water that would normally cause rot, locking the collagen fibers together so the hide will not decay. But tanning does not put the natural oils back. Those are washed away during the process. You are left with a stabilized but completely dry network of fibers. As you wear the leather, bending it, exposing it to rain, sun, and dry air, those microscopic collagen fibers grind against one another. Without any lubrication, this internal friction slowly tears the surface of the fibers apart. That microscopic damage snowballs until you see the visible ugly cracks of neglected leather. Neatsfoot oil prevents this through two main functions. The first is sheer physical penetration. The thickness and molecular footprint of the oil allow it to dive right through the tanned surface and weave deeply into the collagen matrix. It coats the individual fibers, providing a slippery buffer right at the friction points where the tearing would normally start. Its main ingredient, oleic acid, makes up about 70% of the fluid. It is a monounsaturated fat shaped perfectly to slide between the collagen strands, leaving a durable microscopic layer of lubrication. The second function is molecular harmony. Because the fatty acid makeup of Neatsfoot oil is practically identical to the original fat of the cow, it mirrors the natural oils the hide was born with. Leather actually has specific molecular receptors built to grab onto these types of natural fats. Instead of just sitting on top of the hide, the Neatsfoot oil locks into these receptors and becomes part of the leather's internal architecture. Synthetic conditioners, the petroleum jellies and silicone sprays, just don't have this biological compatibility. They slap a shiny coat on the surface and make the leather feel a bit softer for a few days, but they never reach the deep friction points where the real damage starts. A 2016 study proved this. Researchers put Neatsfoot oil, mink oil, a synthetic silicone spray, and petroleum jelly under an electron microscope to see how deep they went. The Neatsfoot oil sank through the entire thickness of the leather in just 12 hours. The expensive synthetic silicone? It barely made it past the top 20%. The $2 animal extract penetrated 5 times deeper than the $20 lab creation. And this is where the industry plays its trick. The leather care market runs on the exact same playbook as so many other luxury industries. Take a dirt cheap, highly effective raw material, give it a beautiful label, invent a heritage backstory, and sell it for a massive markup. Because a quality pair of boots or a good leather bag is an investment, you are psychologically primed to spend premium money to protect it. The flagship brands pitch themselves as artisanal, professional-grade formulas, and they charge $5 to $40 for a few ounces. The formulations aren't fake. They are built on real, traditional expertise. But the markup is astronomical. A 100-milliliter tin of high-end boot oil goes for around $15. What is inside it? Neatsfoot oil, pine pitch, and beeswax. You can buy that exact chemical blend in bulk for about 50 cents. You are paying $14.50 for the tin, the brand name, and the rustic marketing. Worse yet, some modern brands have started quietly swapping out real Neatsfoot oil for cheap petroleum mineral oil, just to cut costs even further, while keeping the phrase Neatsfoot oil on the label as a minor ingredient. But the people whose livelihoods depend on their gear never fell for the marketing. Go talk to the working ranches, the mounted police units, the professional saddle makers. A serious working saddle costs thousands of dollars and needs to last decades. The professionals maintaining that gear rely entirely on pure Neatsfoot oil. They stick with the $2 bottle. The military never forgot either. The official field manual for maintaining leather and webbing explicitly demands Neatsfoot oil for everything from rifle slings to combat boots. The ultimate proof comes from the archives. The Victoria and Albert Museum in London houses some of the most priceless historical leather artifacts on Earth, from centuries-old armor to medieval books. When their conservationists need to preserve an artifact for another 300 years, they don't reach for a $20 luxury tin. They use Neatsfoot oil. Boot restorers on YouTube with millions of views start every single vintage restoration with a deep Neatsfoot soak. It is a track record that no corporate marketing department can buy. So here is your exact blueprint. One afternoon, $2, and your leather is set for decades. You need to source pure Neatsfoot oil. Check your local agricultural supply, a saddlery, or an online leathercraft store. You are looking specifically for 100% pure Neatsfoot oil. Avoid anything labeled compound Neatsfoot oil, as that has been cheaply diluted with mineral spirits. A full liter will run you just a few dollars and is more than enough to treat your entire wardrobe several times over. If you want a heavier weather shield, you can mix 2 parts Neatsfoot oil with 1 part pure beeswax by weight to get deep moisture and surface defense in one go. Grab a soft cloth or a natural bristle brush, a gentle pH-neutral cleaner like classic saddle soap, and a second dry rag for buffing. Always begin by washing the item. If you skip this and go straight to oiling, you are just locking dirt and old residue beneath a fresh layer of fat, which actually speeds up the breakdown of the surface. Take a damp rag with a little saddle soap and scrub in tight circles to lift the grime. Wipe away all the leftover suds with a clean, damp cloth, and then let the hide air dry completely at room temperature for at least 2 hours. Never apply your oil to damp leather. The trapped water will dilute the treatment and block it from penetrating. When it comes to the Neatsfoot oil, go incredibly light. You want a sheer, even glaze, not a flood. Applying thin layers more frequently is vastly superior to drowning the item once a year. Massage the liquid deeply into all the stress zones, the seams, the heavy creases, and the undersides of straps, which is where dry rot usually starts. If the item is severely neglected, that first pass will vanish into the pores almost instantly. Wait 30 minutes, then brush on a second sheer layer. Walk away and let the item rest at room temperature for a minimum of 4 hours, though leaving it overnight is ideal. The material will look alarmingly dark at first, but don't panic. It will lighten back up to its natural shade as the oil pulls deep into the fibers. Crucially, do not try to speed this up with a hairdryer or heater. Heat forces the fats to pool on the surface instead of weaving into the internal structure. Once it is fully absorbed, take your dry cloth and give the surface a brisk buff to lift any leftover residue and bring out a soft shine. You will immediately feel the difference. The rigid stiffness of dry leather will be gone. As for a schedule, for everyday beaters, work boots, a daily carry bag, or working tack, repeat this routine every 3 to 4 months, or the moment the material starts feeling stiff. If you are packing winter gear into storage, oil it before it goes into the closet, and again when you pull it out. And if you just bought something brand new, give it a thorough Neatsfoot soak before you ever take it outside. Pre-lubricating the internal fibers before they take their first mechanical stress will drastically multiply the lifespan of the item. If you are dragging boots through the snow and need serious waterproofing, wait until the Neatsfoot oil is fully dried, then rub a thin layer of pure beeswax over the top and buff it out. The wax physically plugs the surface pores against the rain while still letting the material breathe. You can touch up that wax layer every month or two, while the oil deep inside only needs refreshing a few times a year. Let's run the real numbers. A tiny 75 milliliter jar of a high-end Renovateur will cost you over $20 for mink oil and lanolin. The Neatsfoot equivalent, about 15 cents. A 250 milliliter bottle of popular conditioner is roughly $16 for a Neatsfoot oil blend. The raw oil equivalent, 50 cents. A famous brand's boot oil is $15 for 100 milliliters of Neatsfoot, pine pitch, and beeswax. You can mix those exact raw ingredients yourself for 30 cents. Before we wrap this up, let me introduce you to a specific pair of boots. Up in Toronto, the Bata Shoe Museum houses a pair of British riding boots from around 1780. They are 240 years old. The leather isn't crumbling into dust. It is soft, flexible, and completely structurally sound. They aren't just surviving in a vacuum. You could practically lace them up and ride today. They weren't crafted from some lost magical superhide. It is the exact same tanned animal skin we use right now. The secret is simply maintenance. The museum's acquisition logs show 2.5 centuries of regular Neatsfoot oil treatments. The luxury shoe care industry wants you to believe that keeping your gear alive requires complex laboratory chemistry, justifying their absurd prices. Those boots in Toronto shatter that illusion with over 2 centuries of hard proof. They survived because of the exact same cheap fat that English tanners boiled out of cattle bones, a byproduct available to anyone for pennies. The magic isn't in the chemical formula. The magic is the massive marketing machine built to convince you to pay $20 for 50 cents worth of grease. Neatsfoot oil has been preserving hides since the 1400s. The protein fibers in your favorite jacket, your car interior, and your work boots will react to it today exactly the same way they always have, by drinking it down to the core, distributing it through the matrix, and staying supple enough to last generations. Some secrets are too effective to ever truly die out. They are just sitting on the bottom shelf at the local farm store in a cheap plastic jug, with no fancy photos and no rustic branding, waiting for the person smart enough to ask how the old saddle makers did it. If this video convinced you to put that jug next to your boot brush, subscribe and share it right now. Every time you share, you chip away at that overpriced wall, and every subscription keeps us digging for the truth.